Hello and welcome back to the Movie Memo Recaps. Today we are going to recap a 2003 movie titled Mystic River. Please be advised that there will be spoilers ahead. In the opening scene, we are introduced to three friends: Jimmy, Sean, and Dave playing. Jimmy instructs the two to write their names on the wet concrete of the walkway. Jimmy begins by writing his name, and the two follow suit. However, while Dave is writing his name, a suspicious man posing as a police officer stops him. The frightening man reprimands them and asks where they reside. When the creepy man discovers that Dave does not live nearby, he compels Dave into the car. In terror, Dave enters the car, mistaking the strange man for a cop. Inside, a priest grins at Dave. The strange man and the priest then drive away with Dave, leaving Jimmy and Sean perplexed as they fear their defenseless friend could be killed. Apparently, the scary man and the priest lock Dave in the cellar and molest him for days. Dave escapes his abductors and returns home after days of harrowing experiences. Many years later, Jimmy, Sean, and Dave had grown up and established their own lives, which led to a decrease in their connection. Dave has already formed a family, which includes a kid and wife. Childhood trauma appears to still affect Dave, negatively impacting his mental health. Meanwhile, Jimmy undergoes a transformation from being a thug towards his daughter, Katie, who is the offspring of his deceased first wife. He now marries his second wife, with whom he has two small girls. Meanwhile, Sean embarks on a career as a detective and enters into marriage. Sean frequently receives calls from his wife, who is currently living far away with their baby. Oddly enough, she remains utterly silent during the calls. Katie informs her father on Saturday that she is going out with her friends later that night. Jimmy then allows her. As Katie prepares to go, she looks at Jimmy and vows to meet him later. Outside, Katie finds her boyfriend, Brendan, hiding inside her car. After giving each other a massage, Brendan asks Katie if she would like to continue with their plans for tomorrow, to which she responds positively. That night, Katie and her pals go to the club and have fun drinking and dancing. Meanwhile, Dave, who is drinking at the pub, spots Katie. Midnight comes. At 3 a.m., Dave arrives home covered in blood, with a stomach wound and hand injuries. The wife asks him to go to the hospital, but he refuses. He reveals to her that someone who attempted to attack him caused his injuries. He appears scared, believing that he might have killed that mugger. The next day, Dave's wife checks the newspaper and finds no mention of the deceased mugger. Suddenly, a boy calls 911 and says that there is a car full of blood on the streets. They inquire about the boy's name, but he refuses to disclose it. Meanwhile, Katie is still not returning home. When Jimmy discovers this, he goes to the store and contacts her friend's father. However, he notifies him that she has not come home, having left her companions at 1 a.m. previous night. Later, Brendan, along with his brother, makes a trip to the store to find Katie. Jimmy, who appears to dislike Brendan and his mute brother, coldly announces that he is going to her sister's communion. Following that, Jimmy and his wife attend their other daughter's communion. Meanwhile, Detective Sean and his partner arrive to investigate the bloodied car. The car turns out to be Katie's, but there is no sign of her. Sean speculates that the suspect shot her in the shoulder before running to the grass field. They search the grass field and locate Beauty's dead body. Jimmy, who is concerned about his daughter, notices police cars driving through the streets. He then pursues them till he gets to the crime scene. As soon as Jimmy spots Katie's car, he becomes extremely worried. He asks Sean if Katie is already deceased. Sean's intense anger and distress surface as he finds himself unable to respond to his question, thereby confirming Katie's death. Following that, Jimmy arrives at the police station to determine whether the deceased body belonged to Katie. Sean and his partner confirmed it and questioned Jimmy for details that could help solve the case. Jimmy then claims that everything was normal yesterday, but Katie gave him a look, hinting that she will never see him again. The partner notices this and mentions Jimmy's prison sentence for robbery. The next day, individuals pay their condolences to Jimmy's family at their home. Dave and his wife are also present. The wife continues to give Dave an anxious expression. It appears that she believes Dave is responsible for Katie's death, considering that he abruptly returned home covered in blood last night, precisely at the time of her murder. The partner then reveals to the police chief that they discovered several Vegas hotel leaflets in Katie's luggage. Following that, the detective asks an elderly woman who lives near the crime scene if she saw anything last night. The elderly woman claims she heard a woman's voice saying hello last night, followed by a gunshot. The partner then speculates that Katie knew the murderer. To obtain information, the investigators question Katie's friends about their goodbye party last night in the Vegas pamphlets. The friends then reveal that Katie wanted to go with her secret boyfriend that day to begin a new life in Vegas. This brings the detectives to Brendan. Later, Jimmy pays Dave a visit at his home. Jimmy observes Dave's injury and asks about it. Dave responds that he accidentally took it from the door. Jimmy then expresses his profound regret at Katie's untimely demise. He believes that he should not cry because he is a man, but at this point, he begins to sob. Meanwhile, the detectives question Brendan about their plans to travel to Vegas. When Brendan learns that Katie has died, he becomes distraught and confirms that they were going to Vegas on Sunday. In the final question, the detective asks where Brendan was at the time of Katie's murder. He says he was asleep. The investigators then ask Brendan to participate in a polygraph exam with them. He agrees. Sean receives a call from his wife that night, but she continues to remain silent. He then expresses his exhaustion with his work of sentencing murderers, only to discover that the victims remain dead. The next day, the detectives obtain Brendan's polygraph test results, which he passes. As a result, the investigators continue their search for a new lead by analyzing the people who were in the bar on Saturday night. After discovering Dave's name, they decide to pay him a visit and ask him some questions. The detectives observe his hand injuries. They then ask him if he saw anything suspicious on that day at the pub. Dave claims there was nothing weird at the bar that night. The detective's final query asks Dave where he was when Katie died. In response, Dave lied, claiming to have arrived home at around 1 a.m. afterward. The investigators discuss the case. The partner then suggests that they examine Dave, whom Katie is familiar with. Dave was present at the bar that night and sustained hand injuries. Meanwhile, Jimmy promises his deceased daughter that he will find and kill the perpetrator before police arrive. The detectives return to Jimmy's residence the next day and run into Dave. The partner inquires as to the origin of Dave's wounds. Dave claims that the garbage disposal caused his wounds, but his partner remains unconvinced. Sean then surreptitiously asks Dave's wife what time he arrived home on Saturday night. However, she deceives him by pretending she was sleeping that night, leading him to believe she was unaware. The woman then walks away, visibly irritated. To continue their investigation, the investigators question Jimmy about why he dislikes Brendan. In response, Jimmy expresses his hatred for Brendan's father, Just Ray, for abandoning his family. As a result, he expects Brendan will follow in his father's footsteps. After that, the investigators return to headquarters, where they finally receive the ballistic report. According to the article, the gun used to murder Katie was also used to rob a liquor store several years before. Despite this, the incident resulted in no arrests. The cops question the liquor store owner about the robbery. The business owner tells them that he believes his former employee, Just Ray, was responsible for the robbery. This implies that Just Ray, Brendan's father, was the owner of the gun that killed Katie. Following this, an altercation breaks out between the detectives as Sean refocuses their investigation on Brendan. However, his partner maintains that Dave remains a suspect due to the ease of gun distribution. Dave's wife arrives late at night as he is watching a vampire movie. He asks her where she is from. She then responds blankly, saying that she just thinks about things alone. Dave abruptly addresses her in an irritable tone. He asks her whether she believes he killed Katie. She then asks Dave why he can't report the mugger to the police so he can clear his name in Katie's death. Dave bursts into tears as he shares a horrific childhood memory with his wife. He then claims that his true self perished when his abductor violated him and that he is now a vampire that walks undead. After that, he declares he can't trust his thinking anymore and goes outside for a walk. Meanwhile, Dave's wife is terrified and confused by his conduct. As Dave walks outdoors, he meets Jimmy. He then tells Jimmy that he saw Katie at the bar before she died. The next day, the partner tells Sean that he discovered blood on Dave's car when checking it. He found type B blood on Dave's seat and type O blood in the trunk, both of which match Katie's blood type. They interrogate Dave, but they receive no information from him. Last night, Dave didn't have his car in his possession, despite reports of its loss. Sean then insists on focusing on Just Ray's gun, forcing his buddy to let Dave go. They then investigate Just Ray's record and discover that he has a criminal history with Jimmy. They also learn that he was arrested for robbery, but he never went to jail. As a result, they approach Just Ray's arresting officer to inquire about the circumstances. The arresting officer then discloses that Just Ray misled Jimmy, which resulted in Jimmy's imprisonment rather than his own. After Jimmy's release from jail, Just Ray mysteriously departs, suggesting that Jimmy harbors a desire for revenge against him. Meanwhile, Jimmy and his strong friends arrive at their house, where Dave's wife waits outside. She tells Jimmy that she left Dave because of his strange behavior recently. She then compassionately explains to him that Dave returned home covered in blood after the nocturnal murder of Katie. Jimmy then inquires about Dave's explanation. So Dave's wife tells him that he murdered the mugger, but there is no news of him. Jimmy then asks her whether she thinks her husband killed Katie. She affirms. Inside the headquarters, detectives interview Brendan about his father. Brendan then admits that he hasn't communicated with his father since he departed for a drink and never returned. However, Brendan and his mother don't think just Ray is missing, as he consistently sends them $500 per month. Sean then questions Brendan about his father's gun, informing him that his father used it to murder Katie. Sean becomes upset when Brendan denies seeing his father with a pistol. While waiting for Brendan's reaction, Sean listens to the 911 audio and discovers that the youngster who reported the car knew the victim was a girl, despite the fact that the body was discovered in the park. This implies that the boy may be responsible for Katie's death. Meanwhile, the gang members pick up Dave from the streets and invite him to join them for a drink at a local pub. In the pub, they start drinking, and Jimmy soon joins them. As night falls, Dave becomes tipsy and goes to the Mystic Riverside to puke. Jimmy and his tough companions follow him. Jimmy tells Dave the story of Just Ray, a former friend who ratted him out, resulting in his imprisonment while his wife was suffering cancer. He then admits to killing Just Ray in that particular river and disposing of his remains there. At that point, Dave realizes Jimmy believes he killed Katie, so he cautiously tells Jimmy that he killed a man who was assaulting a boy, but not Katie. However, his inconsistent story and the absence of any evidence of a child molester lead Jimmy to suspect he is lying. Jimmy then forces him to admit that he murdered Katie, which he does. When Jimmy wonders why, Dave replies that Katie reminds him of youth he never had and that Jimmy will understand if he joins the abductor's car instead of him during that childhood accident. Jimmy then stabs Dave before fatally shooting him. Meanwhile, Brendan finally figures out that his brother and his friend got their father's gun and killed Katie. Brendan believes his brother did not want him to leave with Katie. Brendan then brutally beats the friend, punching and kicking his face. As Brendan confronts his sibling, a friend points their father's gun at him. Fortunately, detectives arrive on the scene to quell the disturbance. The next day, Sean sees Jimmy, who is hungover after drinking on the street. Sean informs him that they have finally apprehended the killers. The killers include Brendan's brother and a friend who had already made a confession. Sean then tells Jimmy that the youngsters were simply toying with a gun and, unfortunately, ended up shooting Katie. They then murdered Katie, hoping she would not divulge their crimes to anyone. Jimmy was horrified to learn this, as he had already killed Dave, mistaking him for his daughter's murderer. Sean unexpectedly inquires about Dave's whereabouts, as the police are actively searching for him following the discovery of a child molester's body behind the bar. This also proves Dave was telling the truth. Sean asks, when was the last time he saw Dave? He responds that the last time he saw Dave, he was in the car with the abductors who had taken him away. Sean follows up by asking him what he did to Dave. Jimmy responds by thanking Sean for discovering the culprit but wishing Sean had solved the case sooner. Sean assumes Jimmy must have killed Dave and asks Jimmy if he is ready to donate $500 per month to Dave's family, just like he did after killing Brandon's father. Following that, Sean and Jimmy parted ways. Sean immediately gets a call from his wife. Sean apologizes this time, and his wife eventually speaks out and agrees to reconcile with him. The film concludes during the Boston parade, when Sean finally reunites with his family. Dave's wife wanders aimlessly around the parade, searching for her child, but he declines to speak with her due to his father's untimely return. Meanwhile, his wife comforts Jimmy, affirming that he has fulfilled his fatherly duties. As they come out to watch the parade, Jimmy observes Sean on the other side of the street. He then motions with his gun hand, suggesting that Sean will follow him. In the end, the walkway still bears the names of the three, but Dave's name remains half-written. Thank you for watching. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe for more recaps. Until next time, have a nice day.